introductory song from the oratorio Christ Lives, the introductory song for Mother of Wisdom. God is true, God is love, Father, Mother, both are one. When our hearts cry out in pain, Mother, bring us peace again. Every mother brings to birth hints of thy love for all the earth.
And into meditation after the chant.
So you probably all know Lord, I am thine, so I invite you to join me. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine, I am thine. Lord, I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. Be thou mine, oh, be thou mine. I am thine, I am thine. I am thine, I am thine. I am thine, I am thine. So I invite you to close your eyes if they're not already closed. Straighten your spine. Feel your feet on the floor. You can rest your hands at the juncture of thighs and abdomen. Bring your shoulders back. Open your chest and your heart. Bring your inner gaze to the point between the eyebrows of the spiritual eye. And just take some deep breaths in and out. You can add hong and saw with the breath. Hong and saw. Let that be your mantra when the mind drifts to past and future. And we'll just continue to open your heart to God, to the divine. We'll take about 5 minutes in meditation. I invite you just to continue to open your heart. Keep your inner gaze at the point between the eyebrows. And repeat Hong Saw.
While remaining in a meditative state, please listen to this week's affirmation for self-healing by Swami Kriyananda. Concentration. Concentration is the secret of success in every undertaking. Without concentration, thoughts, energy, inspiration, purpose, all one's inner forces become scattered. Concentration is the calm focus of one's full attention on the purpose at hand. Concentration means more than mental effort. It means channeling your heart's feeling, your faith, and your deep aspirations into whatever you are doing. In that way, even the little things in life can become rich with meaning. Concentration should not involve mental strain. When you really want something, it is difficult not to think about it. Concentrate with interest on whatever you do, and you will find yourself absorbed in it. Please repeat after me in a loud voice, awakening the conscious mind. Whatever I do in life, I give it my full attention. Like a laser beam, I burn from before me all problems, all obstructions.
I burn from before me all problems, all obstructions.
And now in a conversational tone. Whatever I do in life, I give it my full attention. Like a laser beam, I burn from before me all problems, all obstructions. And now in a whisper, bringing the affirmation into the subconscious mind. Whatever I do in life, I give it my full attention. Like a laser beam, I burn from before me all problems, all obstructions. And now in silence, whatever I do in life, I give it my full attention. Like a laser beam, I burn from before me all problems, all obstructions. And now with rising aspiration and deep concentration at the point between the eyebrows, bringing the affirmation into superconscious awareness. Again, silently repeat. Whatever I do in life, I give it my full attention. Like a laser beam, I burn from before me all problems, all obstructions. Help me to see thee, Lord, as the scriptures describe thee, the most relishable. Help me to concentrate on thee, my gaze, my love, my aspirations, my entire being. And now we'll have our reading from Rays of the One Light. Can someone check the, Kelly can read.
Week 31, How Democratic is Truth. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it and your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. We live in an age when people assume that knowledge should be available equally to all, and matters susceptible of judgment by normal common sense. However, everyone knows that there are exceptions. Access to a control room for intercontinental missiles is limited by universal consent to a very few. Access to the controls of the passenger airline is limited to those with the necessary knowledge for operating them, and also to those with the proper authorization. If people don't see the disadvantages of making more subtle knowledge universally available, it is only because they are ignorant of the risks involved. In the case of subtle knowledge, the main disadvantage in making it universally available is the harm it might do to one who isn't ready for it and who might even mock it. True, by mocking truth, he might underestimate the faith of a new truth seeker. By then, such tests can also be beneficial as a means of strengthening faith. Again, true, the clever doubter's misrepresentation of those truths may dissuade a few seekers from following the spiritual path. But if a seeker really is sincere, he will recognize the truth eventually because it resonates with his own being. No, the greatest problem occurs to the shadow doubter himself. To give him an opportunity to affirm his ignorance might not only estrange him even more from the truth, delaying the time when he will turn, as all people must eventually, to the light. Thus, the scripture advised not secretly, but discretion in the sharing of truth. Jesus Christ says in the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 7, "Give not that which is holy unto dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn against and render you." And Sri Krishna says in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, "Never speak of these truths to one who is without self-control or devotion, who renders no service, who does not care to hear, or who speaks ill of me." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Oh, oh, oh.
Friends, I invite you to hear this prayer demand from Paramhansa Yogananda. This is called, "I was made for thee." I was made for thee alone. I was made for dropping flowers of devotion gently at thy feet on the altar of the morning. My hands were made to serve thee willingly, to remain folded in adoration, waiting for thy coming, and when thou comest, to bathe thy feet with my tears. My voice was made to sing thy glory. My feet were made to seek thy temples everywhere. My eyes were made a chalice to hold thy burning love and the wisdom falling from thy nature's hands. My ears were made to catch the music of thy footsteps echoing through the halls of space, and to hear thy divine melodies flowing through all heart tracks of devotion. My lips were made to breathe forth thy praises and thine intoxicating inspirations. My love was made to throw incandescent searchlight flames to find thee hidden in the forest of my desires. My heart was made to respond to thy call alone. My soul was made to be the channel through which thy love might flow uninterruptedly into all thirsty souls. Amen. So friends, it is so good to be with you today and to be with you in this way. As I explained, I've kind of been straddling two worlds in my life as a minister. So I started seminary in 2004 in the fall, and in that winter and spring, I read Autobiography of a Yogi of 2004. And my parents, even though I grew up in a church, they had given me Man's Eternal Quest when I was in college, and I kind of leafed through it a little bit. But it wasn't until I read that book in 2004, right before I entered seminary, that I was like, oh, wow, I want more of this. And so I did. And so I came down, I found Ananda, I found the Ananda Rhode Island Center with Larry and Paramhansa, and I got Kriya in 2006. And so I've been straddling both of these paths at the same time. And it's been a great blessing for me. And, it's only recently that I feel like I've been more out there in terms of like my connection to Yogananda. Because, in traditional churches, sometimes if you're not drawing from traditional church sources, you're considered a heretic, or that's blasphemy, or, whatever, there's judgment, or there's some form of condemnation. And it was I think it was around 2017, probably, I'm sure we've all had this experience. I was feeling like kind of a little dry spell in my spiritual practice. And you feel like, I gotta re-energize, I gotta reinvigorate that. And where do you think my sources of energy came from? It was from Ananda. It was from the teachers and the teachings on this path that re-energized my spiritual practice. And so I'm deeply indebted to this path in so many ways. And, because it's so opposite from traditional church. Traditional church has kind of said, well, what's most important is your beliefs, and you have to believe certain ways. And if you don't believe certain ways, then there's judgment, or there's condemnation, or you're called a heretic, or whatever it is. Whereas Master said that belief, we want to hold belief more lightly. It's more about our experience of God. I remember when my wife, who, she still goes to church, she's not as much a part of this, but she came down to the Ananda Rhode Island, and she told, I think it was Paramhansa, she's like, I don't know if I believe in this. And Paramhansa was like, well, what if it was less about belief and more about experience? And that's what Yogananda brought, that it's less about what we believe and more about what we experience. And so in that way, it's more about experimenting with having this spirit of spiritual adventurousness and practicing our faith. How do we practice our faith? So that's this new paradigm that Yogananda brought that I've continued to live into as I've straddled these two worlds. So the denomination that I was ordained in is called the United Church of Christ, which is the church that I grew up in Massachusetts. And, every church, because there's thousands of different Protestant denominations, every church has its own polity, which is basically a way of how you organize yourselves. And I won't go into too much detail because I had a whole semester class on the polity, of the denomination. But basically, it's how you organize yourself. So, the most kind of well-known polity is the Catholic Church, which is a very hierarchical polity in the sense that, it starts with the priests, and then it moves to the bishops and the archbishops and the cardinals, and then the ultimate authority resides in the Pope. Well, in the United Church of Christ, it's a different polity where every church organizes itself. So there's no kind of greater bishops or popes. Nobody's saying you have to do this, you have to believe in that. And certainly there's some accountability, like if there's ever any misuse or ethical violations, then there's ways to hold people accountable. But just because we're organized differently, some people think like, oh, we hold that polity of, because each church runs itself, then we're kind of spiritually superior to others, right? But what Swami Kriyananda said in his Revelations of Christ book, he talked about how do we get our authority in in church matters. And this is a quote from him in his book, Revelations of Christ, where he talks about the revelation, the custodians of religion aren't those necessarily in authority. He says, how is one to understand the life and teachings of the great master Jesus? Tradition offers us two approaches. One, the authority of the church, the other, that of historical analysis, which Christian scholars lately have been applying to certain discovered texts. There is another approach, less widely known, but more reliable than any other. It is to study the writings and sayings of, or better still, to live with and study under saints who have communed directly in deep states of ecstasy with Christ and God. And so it's less, what I found is it's less about the polity, whether it's a hierarchical church or whether it's a non-hierarchical church, because your polity isn't going to take you to God. There's plenty of churches that are totally non-hierarchical who it's kind of just the blind leading the blind. And that can take different forms. Sometimes it's, in more extreme fundamentalist cases, it's kind of people who have very fear-based beliefs in judgment and hell, and they're passing along those fear-based beliefs to others, and you're trying to convert other people so that you don't go to hell. That's one extreme. The other more common that I found in the mainline church is that people have a more academic version of faith. It's very intellectual. And I experienced this at my 10 years of being a chaplain at Brandeis. It's often very intellectual. And that's not bad, because we're supposed to love God with our heart, mind, soul, and strength. But if it's only our mind, then we're only loving God with our conscious mind. And we don't have people who are leading us in that super conscious, how to attune to that super conscious ray. And that's where I've been so grateful to Ananda, because we have Master, we have Swamiji, we have people who have attuned themselves to that ray. And so it's a little easier. Whereas, just because that's part of what the reading today was saying, that just because it's a democratically organized community or church, doesn't mean it's going to help you to lead you to self-organization. Because sometimes it's just people who have no spiritual sight leading others into a place that's very similar. So sometimes it's not necessarily what you have, it's what you don't know you don't have. And what my experience of the mainline church, since I got ordained in 2010 in the United Church of Christ, is that what they don't realize they don't have, for the most part, is meditation. Right? Now, they often teach prayer, and the form of prayer is kind of talking to God, because the minister gets up and I'm talking to God. And but if our relationship with God is like a friendship and a conversation, then talking is one part of it, but listening is the other part, right? And so that's the piece that's been missing really deeply in churches. So right before the pandemic started, in March of 2020, I feel like it was a synchronicity thing. I started reading Light Bearer. I don't know if some of you read that by Asha Nayaswami. Really long book, but I really loved it. And since I've had many conversations with Asha, and she's wonderful. And I hadn't known before reading that book that in the 1980s, Swami Kriyananda had started what he called the movement of inner communion. You may have heard of that. And basically that was a way of trying to introduce meditation into churches. And, was really trying to invest a lot of time and energy and because he saw the church as a partner in this work. And so investing a lot of work in how do I bring meditation into church settings? And long story short, he felt like he failed in the sense that the churches weren't open to it. Not that they not failed in the sense they didn't put a lot of energy in it, because he put a lot of energy into it, whether it's with the oratorio or trying to reach out to different churches, but failed in the sense that churches just weren't open and receptive to that. And what I've found since then is that the churches are a little bit more receptive, not totally, but that's what Jesus says to Babaji. That's what we'll read later in the Festival of Light, where Jesus says, the lights on the high altar of my church have been growing dim. Though still lit on lower altars of good works, the noble taper of inner communion with the Lord burns low and is ill-attended. So it's that sense that, that there's a lot of good works going on in churches, but that meditation, that openness to communion with God is just, it's absent. I didn't find that in my church settings growing up. And I was really blessed to have a mother who was open to other paths that helped to guide me in that. So I know that I don't come here often, especially because I serve two other churches, but this feels like a spiritual home to me, right? Because it's strange in a lot of ways. I feel it's a calling for me to serve the mainline church, at least right now. That's how it's expressing. But it's strange to serve churches where meditation is a foreign thing, where people just, there's kind of a lot of skepticism and there's some healthy skepticism too, but it's often a foreign thing. And so I feel a sense of home here in Ananda. And it's still strange to me why God has called me to serve the mainline church, but I feel that God continues to call me to serve the mainline church, and not just my 2 local churches that I serve, but the wider church too. And I'll just give you one example of that. So the United Church of Christ every 2 or 3 years has what's called the General Synod. And that's when the entire denomination gets together to do the work and worship of the church. And in 2017, I was asked to be a delegate for the first time at a General Synod. There's about between 600 and 700 delegates who meet, at a different location, and a couple thousand people that come together. And it was a good experience, but it was also, as someone who follows this path too, it was a lot of activity and not a lot of time for quiet prayer and meditation. And so me and another pastor who were kind of similarly minded, we made what's called like a 1-minute speak out. And we said, it would be great at the next synod in 2019 if we had a quiet prayer space. Wouldn't that be nice? And so in typical fashion for my denomination, about 2 months before the next synod in 2019, they said, sure, we'll have a quiet prayer space and you organize it. Because that's the way our church works. Like if you want to do something, you do it. And so we did. In 2019, we organized a quiet prayer space, and it was great. And at the end of the General Synod in 2019, myself and this other pastor, we were thinking, gosh, what if, because a lot of our what's moving our denomination forward is what's called these resolutions at General Synod. And often they're very active around social justice things, because that's where our denomination's kind of focus has been. And so we had this inspiration, what if we had a resolution about becoming a church of contemplatives in action? Not saying it's either or, like only action or only contemplation, which includes meditation, but both and. And, so fast forward, after 2019 Synod, me and this other pastor, we drafted this resolution. And then in 2021, we had the next General Synod, which was all virtual because of COVID, but this resolution passed unanimously and is moving the church in this direction, I admit very slowly, but I'll just give you a couple brief quotes from this resolution, which is called Becoming a Church of Contemplatives in Action. Periodically, Jesus can be found stealing away from the busyness of the crowds to pray in Luke chapter 5. Jesus's public witness of creating inclusive community, exemplifying self-giving love and service, forming disciples, making peace, and engaging in nonviolent resistance to the powers that be is all made possible because of his prayerful union with the Father from John chapter 10. The church's great commandment from God is to love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. Jesus rooted his ministry of teaching, healing, and solidarity with the marginalized through a life of prayer, solitude, silence, and intimate relationship with God. So those are just 2 short snippets of a couple pages of the text of this resolution. And so you can see where I'm, it's a strange calling that I have of kind of paralleling these 2 worlds, but it's been such a blessing since 2017, since I've been coming out, you might say, more, so to speak, of being more out there with my relationship with Yogananda. And even this, so one of the churches I serve has a partnership with the library in Waltham. And so I convinced them, like we do 5 books every year. In September, we're going to do Autobiography of a Yogi for our book group. And, I've talked with Divalila and some folks at Ananda, and, for people who are open to that, then they can, begin the path of Kriya. So it's like, how do we begin to bridge these worlds of not saying it's got to be this or it's got to be that? Because Master was always, initiating people into Kriya, and he didn't care what path they were from. And that was Swamiji's hope, that we could bring meditation into churches. And what I found, 40 years after he started that and felt like just people weren't receptive, that is still true, but there's also a lot more people that are receptive now, because there are people saying, I'm hungry for this. And what they found since the 1980s is people are just moving all the, mindfulness is a huge focus now in hospitals and schools everywhere. And so people are hungry for this, but they're just not getting it in church. As the church is slowly beginning to see that, oh, wow, this is important. And it's not important just because it's becoming more popular, but because it was part of who Jesus was, and that's why Jesus appeared to Babaji and said, the lights on the high altar of my church have been growing dim, and we want to do something about that. And Swamiji was passionate about that. Swamiji had this fire for spreading this message because Master had that fire for spreading that message. It was that fire of the third chakra, but it's different. Christians have often been known for having that fire. In Christian circles, it's called evangelism, right? That's the fire for spreading the gospel, but it's not softened by love, which Swamiji and Master did, and it's not guided by wisdom at the spiritual eye. And that's what we need. We need that same evangelical spirit of, this is a message that should be shared. People are hungry for it, but not in that judgmental and condemning way that has often been known for in evangelical church settings, but in a way that we open our hearts, love people as they are, and we let it be guided by the Christ Center. Because that's Master's invitation, Swami's invitation from our reading from Whispers today. My heart was made to respond to thy call alone. And then he follows that by, my soul was made to be a channel through which thy love might flow uninterruptedly into all thirsty souls. So following our call and letting that call always be guided by love. Amen.
Amen.